Since we last left off, there have been some changes going on, as you might be able to see. I started working with the Pro Builder plugin from Unity to start building our tutorial level out. I figured I've got the combat systems down decently well now. There's going to be a lot of stuff that needs improvement. And I also make the camera so that it scales in, or zooms in rather, when it collides with a wall or with a floor or whatever. So I've made a couple of rooms connected by corridors. That's mostly how the game is going to function as a Metroidvania-like game, but more open world, I suppose, because I don't plan on blocking access to new areas with abilities. I just plan on those areas being more difficult. So you could go to the final area right away if you wanted to. Here we have a little bit of a platforming section. That's not going to be probably a common thing in the game, but I'm still going to put in a dash move, which is going to be a dodge roll, but it's going to be a dash because it requires less animating is mostly the reason for that. So what we'll do here is we'll put in some experience, this game's version of Souls, whatever we end up calling it, over on this platform, and you'll need to be able to jump and then dash in midair to get to it so that the player will try out some things and learn to use the dashing move. Then moving on to the next area. Obviously these are all development textures. I need to make actual textures for that. We get to a training dummy, which I need to make a model for still, but this will show the player the basics of the combat system, which will give them a little bit more experience once this thing dies. And then we go up this platform here through one more hallway to the actual start of the game. So we have this hallway here going into this area where you can see there's some enemies. There's a spawner with 3 waves in this room. And this room will then lead into 3 different loading zones that all go into separate areas. So we've got this purple, this green, and this red area. For the time being, I'm going to focus on just like making the purple one. But eventually, the idea will be that going into the purple one, there will be ways to get into the green one from there. And moving from the green, you can also go to the red one. And from there, we can expand the map as much as we'd like. But before we get into any of that level design, which is going to be a lot of work, I'm going to draw up a rough map of what the actual like top-down map is going to look like before I start implementing different scenes for that. So that's the basic introduction of the game. And as we just discussed, there's 2 things that are shown off in here which do not exist yet in the game, which is our dashing ability, and then also the experiences you get here and the experience that you get from defeating enemies. So I think making the dash first is probably the best course of action, because both of them are relatively easy. Today is going to be a relatively laid back and easy type of deal. We also eventually are going to need to make an inventory, or at least a menu screen to level up, because the way I want this to work is leveling up only will be possible at the, again we're going a little Souls-like here, equivalent of like bonfires, so checkpoints. That's the place that you will be leveling up. I'm not entirely sure what we're going to do with level up systems, if I'm just going to have like character level up, or if I'm going to have the individual levels also be able to level up. But for that, we're going to need to have an experience system to begin with, and some sort of inventory system that keeps track of what items we have, like which type of weapons and stuff like that. I'm thinking the only way to access that inventory will be through the checkpoints. So once you leave a checkpoint, you decide, you know, this is the load I'm going to go with until I find another checkpoint. So that's the more or less overview of what the game is going to be like. Anyway, let's go into our player movement. And in our update function, we'll also get a if inputs get button down, I will make a button for dash. And also we'll make a bool for can dash, which by default will be set to true. Well, I suppose we can just set the rigid body, which we get from the player manager, which I'm going to change that to public variables soon rather than functions. I did a little bit of Googling. This is needlessly inefficient. Anyway, we set that to transform.forward multiplied by serialized field float dash. So we then also set can dash to being false. And I think we already have a check for if we land on the ground. So that should then set the can dash back to being true. Okay, we can dash once. Really, you end up on the ground anyway. And I can't dash while I'm on the ground. Okay, maybe... maybe putting that on left shift wasn't the best idea ever. Because now I need to jump in order for that to... Okay, that is actually a problem. In that case, we will do something different here. And we'll make a void enable dash and just can dash to being true in that. It's a little trick I figured out the other day, because we can set can dash to false and then we can invoke can dash with a delay of 0.2 seconds. Oh, the method that we're trying to invoke is called enable dash, not can dash, so obviously that's not going to work. Something as easy as just a dashing move, it's already thrown me for a loop. Just kind of sad, honestly. Yeah, there needs to be a bit more of a delay between those, so let's put that on. Let's go for 3/4 of a second and then a half a second of iframes. I think that seems fair. The iframes. Do I have iframes? Did I call it iframes? Let's see. Yeah, we have a bool for attacking, which I now use for iframes, but those probably should be two different things, because if we go into the weapon script, right, it checks for whether or not we're attacking as well. So attacking and iframes should be two different things. So let's make that a public bool iframe, which by default is set to false. Get player combat iframes is equals to true, and then we'll do something similar to what we just did with the other method, and that'll be disable iframes, and that'll just set the iframes back to being false, and we can just set this to being 0.5 and then disable iframes, which then in the enemy method we also need to start checking for the iframes, which honestly we're just going to swap out the combat attacking for combat dot iframes, and then everywhere where we set attacking to true we also set iframes to true or false. So this is going to be a bit of a pain to test whether or not it works, and of course the dash is going to have an animation of its own together with some particle effects, but for the time being this is everything there will be to it. Okay, so here we put the experience orbs that we're still yet to make. I'm thinking enemies won't directly give experience, it'll be something that you actually have to pick up and collect, so enemies upon death will just drop an experience orb with a certain value. I don't know why I'm attacking this thing, because it's not gonna attack me back. That seems to have actually worked decently well. Yeah, okay, so wait, I did still get damage there though, didn't I? Yeah, no, I think this iframe thing works decently well. I also think I need to rebake the navigation mesh. I think that does the trick. So now let's get into the experience, which will be kept in the player stats. Let's make this public. This can be an integer. There's no reason that this should ever be like 0.5 experience, right? The experience are probably going to always be round numbers. Just call it XP. And also our heads up display is going to need to display that first. So let's actually do that first so that we can see what's going on. We'll do that in the prefab. Make an extra text here and call it display experience. We'll make a serialized field for player stats. We'll be using TM Pro. So we'll also get a text mesh Pro GUI, and we'll call that text. The whole usual thing, giving it that value, and then text will be equal to player stats dot experience dot toString, and it's as simple as fucking that. So back in here, we just get the player object, which is located somewhere in this entire mess of lighting and stuff. Oh, it's under this game object. I don't know if I made this on screen, but I made a prefab of the player and the camera, and then I also made a prefab that holds both of those things together, just for ease of being able to move things around. So we have 100 HP and 0 experience. That makes sense to me. Let's make a 3D object. Let's make it a sphere. It'll be a smaller sphere though. We'll give that a rigid body, and we'll actually just allow that to rotate and roll around. And then we'll make a XP orb script where we can give you public XP count, which obviously is going to be an int. Reason we're going public there is because the enemy, when it spawns this thing, is going to need to be able to set this. I think that's the only variable that we're really going to need, isn't it? We don't need a start, we don't need a update function. The only thing we need is a onCollision enter, and a variable for player is equals to collision game objects, get components, player stats, and then we check if player is not equal to null. We say player dot xp plus equals xp count and destroy this game object. So let's say that the XP count for this is 100. Then when we walk into this, we'll get 100 XP. It really is that easy. We can just put this into our prefabs because this is literally everything there is to it. Call it XP orb, remove that from there, and then we can just put that XP orb in here. Which, to be honest, we might want to give it a different material because the material fucking sucks. Okay, that's more or less what I wanted to look like. Now, let's give the enemy script a experience value as well and make it spawn one of these things as you kill the enemy. So we'll give this a serialized field for XP. Let's set that by equal 10 to like 10. Something like that. XP orb. No. Integer. XP. But to be fair, we also need a serialized field for a game object for the XP orb. So, and then on kill enemy, we instantiate the XP orb at transform position, quaternion identity, game objects, which has a capital O, game object, let's just call it orb, equals that, and then we just put in orb get component XP count, stuff like that. Again, probably should have set your HP to being like 10 so that I could one hit you, but this is fine. Okay, so now our experience drops work as well. And at this point, I've actually already done everything that I wanted to do in today's video. We've got that thing set up, we've got our experience, and again, for the level up, I'm going to need to make an entire goddamn UI and stuff like that, and all the UI I have up until now. This is going to give an error when it dies. Yeah, it's not actually going to die because I don't have a game object for the experience thing set. Interesting. I'm not going to go into like the level up system right now. That's an entire video, probably 2, probably 3 in and of itself. But we've got the basic shape of what we're going to be doing here. So I guess making a leveling system is the next logical step here, which also means that we're going to need to make our version of bonfires. There's actually quite a lot of things that needs to do, because that needs to have a menu for leveling up. It needs to have a save function. It needs to work as a checkpoint. So there's a lot of things to do there. I think we're going to cut this up into a couple of different subtasks. That being, first we're going to add a checkpoint function to it, so that when you die, you get reset back to the last... I'm going to keep calling them bonfires for the time being, because effectively that's what they are. You visited, and everything else in the map gets reset, and all of the experience that you had is going to be dropped in an experience orb where you died. But then if you die again, that previous experience orb is going to have to be destroyed. So yeah, that's plenty challenging enough to have that as our next goal. And from there, I think making a save point system is not going to be that difficult. But that probably is going to require me to like hook everything into some kind of level manager, which will reset enemy spawners and kill currently existing enemies when the level gets reset. Otherwise, you're going to have to reload the entire map. And since we don't have anything like destructible terrain or anything, there's no reason to reload the entire map. I think that works in theory. Next time, we're going to put that into practice. So do keep up to date for that one.